there's so much that Yale throws at you right at the beginning in terms of like support and mentorship and community opportunities. It was just all very new to me, and I couldn't really understand why people, especially Yale alums, were just such diehard fans of Yale, and they would love talking about Yale. And it took me a while to understand, now that I finally graduated, why they have such a deep bond with Yale and why they are so helpful to other Yale undergraduate students.
What is a buttery? Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Spill the Tea with CC, where we get insider insights from students who've walked the talk. In this fascinating episode, we're excited to learn all about Yale University, a private Ivy League research institution located in New Haven, Connecticut. Yale is the third oldest institution in the United States and one of the 9 colonial colleges chartered before the American Revolution. If you're thinking about applying to Yale and wondering whether it would be a good fit for you, be sure to hit subscribe to watch us spill the tea on all the top colleges around the world. Today, I'm beyond excited to introduce our very special guest for the episode, Vaibhav. Vaibhav, why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm Vaibhav. I graduated from Yale this past December. I majored in computer science, and I'll be working at Bloomberg starting March as a software engineer.
Great to have you here. I'd like to start with your academic experience at Yale. It is known for a distinctly liberal arts curriculum, particularly for the undergrads. So share a little bit about your experience with the academics at Yale.
So with the liberal arts curriculum, there's just so much freedom that you have to take whatever classes you want, whatever subject you want to explore. And in my case, my major was computer science, but beyond computer science, you also have distributional requirements that you have to take in order to fulfill your degree. And those distributional requirements are in a lot of areas: sciences, social sciences, humanities, writing, quantitative reasoning. So you're forced to take these classes to explore all of these different subjects that you wouldn't otherwise explore with your major. And that's something that I think was really beneficial to me, because I was able to take classes in philosophy, sociology, anthropology, psychology, all of these fields that really on the surface had nothing to do with CS or what I would want to work in, but ended up having such a big impact on my life.
That's really interesting. So can you give us an example of like one particular class that you took that left a mark on you?
For sure, yeah. I think, so it's kind of hard to decide which one was my favorite, but I think 2 definitely compete for the top spot. The first one was a class called Perspectives on Human Nature, taught by Joshua Knobe, and it was a big lecture, and it combined philosophy with psychology. So what he would do is he would take what philosophers would say about perspectives on human life, how humans battle the different problems that life throws at you: misery, death, grief, etc. And what do psychologists have to say about that in their empirical studies? Is it true? Is that how we think about life in a philosophical aspect? Is it actually true in real life? Like any lecture at Yale, it also had smaller sections where you would meet with about like 5-6 other students that were also taking the class, and you would have a TA, and then you would talk with the TA about what you covered in the class, and you would try to come up with experiments to prove or disprove certain philosophical assumptions that you would have. Let's say that I think that I will feel sad because I lost my job, and it will definitely continue to impact me in the next 6 to 7 months or so on and so forth. And I could think about it in a very philosophical way, but would it actually work like that? And is there any way to like test that in real life? So you would just deal with these kind of experiments in that class, and I think it really changed how I approached a lot of problems in my life, and just like the whole concept of sadness and grief took on a very different notion. And then the second class that I would say competes with that spot is one called Leadership as Behavior, and it was a college seminar. So each residential college has its own seminar that it offers every semester. They're super hard to get into, but once you get into them, they're really rewarding. And this one was an experiential seminar. So you meet in a theater with about 10 other kids, and you sit facing each other in a circle, and you just learn how to build better communication skills, how to build trust, psychological safety with each other, and learn how to be a better leader, but really just be a better person. And I think that class was super impactful. It was one that I took last semester. It really influenced how I approach relationships and conversations in life in general.
That's so interesting, especially as sort of strictly STEM kid coming into it. To what extent do you feel like this breadth of exposure enriched like your approach to CS, if
For sure. I think the breadth of exposure really makes you approach the subject in a very different way than you would otherwise, because with the requirements of the major, like computer science, you're taking the hardcore computer science technical skills classes like systems programming, software programming, etc. But to actually think about how it applies in real life, let's say if I were to start a company of my own, how would I go about leading it? That would be something that I wouldn't otherwise learn in an academic environment had I not taken that class. I took another class called Technology and Culture, which was an anthropology class, and all it dealt with was how does tech fit into our lives and how we function as a society. And I think having an understanding of those things is really important if you want to go into these fields and make a change. And yeah, I think that's how the breadth really benefits you.
Yeah, that's so important. I feel like studying any discipline in a strict silo is incredibly impractical in the real world. So this sort of equipping you with that, real world perspective.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that every major at Yale typically culminates in some sort of a capstone or senior thesis project. So tell us a little bit about yours.
So you're right. Every major at Yale, you have to take a senior seminar or do a senior project of sorts to mark an end to your major. And for me, I built something for my computer science major. So I wanted to actually get hands-on and build something that was physical that I could show to people around me. So I decided to build a smart class that could translate English text to Hindi. So it broadened the concept of accessibility. So usually when we think of accessibility, we think of bigger text or just audio accessibility. We don't think about language barriers, and the idea behind the class was to help with that sort of a barrier as well, provide accessibility for that in countries like India, but also in many other countries where regional languages do not find their place in technology.
Wonderful. That's amazing. So you mentioned the residential colleges earlier, and we know that that's a huge part of the Yale undergraduate experience. So what was it like for you?
So the way they try to pitch the residential college system is that it's a microcosm of the university. They use these fancy words, but really I do think it's true that you find like a miniature aspect of the whole college within your residential college. So each student, once they get in and they choose to accept, they get placed into one of the 14 residential colleges, and it's completely random. And within those colleges, each college has its own dining hall, its own library, its own gym, its own buttery, its own facilities, and you can move off campus after 2 years. You can also switch colleges, but most people choose to remain in the same college and live on campus for 4 years because it becomes such a big part of your Yale experience. You live in these like crazy old buildings with these really great facilities, and you get to spend your entire college experience with the same set of people. So you see them throughout the day. You go into the dining hall, you want to grab a quick breakfast, and you'll see your friend just sitting across the table. You go to the library, or you go to the buttery, or any of these things. You just find these spaces to hang out with people, and I think it's a really beneficial system. I think it's something that makes Yale really unique, because even if you go to the campus, most of the campus is just like the buildings that you see are going to be residential college buildings. Right. The campus revolves around undergraduate residential life, and your college can become your whole world and can provide you with a community. So in my case, one of my most important communities in college came out of my residential college, which was Murray.
Okay. Are these like themed?
I mean, so they're not really themed, but they all have their own different architectural style. They all work in pairs, and they're kind of spread out across, and each one has its own like distinct architectural style. So the way Murray was paired with Franklin, so Murray and Franklin are right next to each other, and people joke that they look like granola bars, but some of them have like very old Gothic style architecture. Some of them have a slightly more modern sort of approach to the architecture, but they all have their own mascots as well. So for Murray, it was the lemur, because Lee Moore. So and they all have their own chants, their own traditions. Each college has its own head of college and dean, and they help create an identity for the college. And they all have their own flags, their own logos. So it's sort of like a mini house, mini school, like a Hogwarts house kind of situation within the whole Yale College.
It's clear that Yale values the community feeling and the experience of each student to kind of build relationships that will last and sort of transcend the college experience. So before my next question though, dumb question, what is a buttery?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. I should have clarified that earlier. So a buttery so each college has its own basement as well, and the basements have these cafes. They're student run, and they stay open from 11 to 2 every weeknight. So when you're really grinding on a piece set or studying for an exam, or if you're just really hungry and it's the middle of the night, you just go down to the buttery and you get some food, and it's heavily subsidized as well.
Oh, nice.
And you just hang out with other people around there. So there are like game rooms and stuff. So that's what a buttery is. It's one of the many like niche Yale things, I think.
Yeah, I've never heard of that in other schools. Speaking of communities and the relationships that you build, tell us more about the extracurricular activities that you engaged in on campus.
For sure, yeah. The whole process of getting involved with extracurricular activities is really just like shopping. They literally have a bazaar that's called the EC Bazaar that you go to in your like first or second week, a fall semester where every club and every sport puts up a stall, and you go around and you talk to them and you ask about their clubs and sort of show interest, and then they show interest in you. It's really just like shopping for your interests, and there's just so much that you can do. I really don't have the number on top of my head, but there's just so many, like hundreds and hundreds of options of things that you can get involved with. In my case, I got involved with the Yale Daily newspaper, so sort of like the Rory Gilmore-esque Yale, and I worked as a photographer and then a photo editor for the newspaper, which was a very rewarding experience. You get to cover a lot of university events as well as New Haven events, which is super cool. And then besides that, I got involved with some random stuff on the side. I did dance works my first year, which was it's a non-audition based dance group that anyone can join, and you just perform and everyone comes in towards the end of the semester to see your performances. I got involved with the International Relations Association, which has a lot of conferences and educational programs that you can attend across the world. They will literally pay for you to go to any other continent or country and just do cool stuff there. And I also was part of Code Haven, which is this non-profit organization that you partner up with, and you go to middle schools in New Haven, public middle schools, and you teach kids how to code. You become their first introduction to computer science and coding, which is really cool as well.
Wow, wonderful. I think just as important as the classroom experience is, the activities that you get involved in outside the classroom really shape your college experience and shape you as a person, right? And prepare you for your future. But you mentioned many times New Haven and your interactions with the surrounding city. And historically, universities have had diverse dynamics with their larger communities. Yeah. Sometimes there's friction there, sometimes not. So what was it like as a college student living and studying in New Haven, Connecticut?
So I personally love New Haven. I think it's a great place to go to school. Like you mentioned, Yale and New Haven also have had a very complex history that has developed over the past 2 centuries. And I think Yale's tried a lot to sort of improve its relationship with New Haven. And there are all of these programs and these service groups that work with New Haven as well. But there are a lot of ways in which you can go out and serve the New Haven community, which I really like. In terms of New Haven itself, I think it's a great place to go to college because it's not too big of a city so that you don't lose your college experience to the city, and it's not in the middle of nowhere either. So you do get some sort of a town/city experience, but it's still very much about your college. And there's just so much to do in New Haven as well. There's so many good food spots to check out, bars to go out to, and just even in terms of fitness, there's a lot of things that are coming up in New Haven as well. So there's just so many things that you can do within New Haven, which I think is great. And I think even the location is perfect because it's really on the northeast corridor. So it's about 2 hours from Boston, 2 hours from New York, direct train connections. So I think in terms of the location, I don't think I would go to college anywhere else but New Haven, even though it was a city I'd never heard of before. And a lot of people have concerns about the safety in New Haven, but in my personal experience for the past 4 years, there was not a single time that I felt unsafe walking around campus at night.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. You mentioned New Haven's accessibility to various big cities nearby, and I can imagine that a lot of students look for job opportunities, internship opportunities in these cities. So tell us about, how Yale supported you in getting the professional work experience that you were looking for.
For sure, yeah. There's so much that Yale throws at you right at the beginning in terms of like support and mentorship and community opportunities. It can almost be too hard to like actually figure out how to go about it, and especially if you're coming in from a system that does nothing like that, which was the case for me. I think I found it a little hard to manage. I was like, I don't know how to make the most out of it, and I wasn't even sure like what I'm supposed to do with all of these like mentorship opportunities and all of the like people that they were throwing at me, because you get in contact with your head of college, your dean of college, your FROCA. There's just so many people that come in and contact you. But now 4 years later, I realized that there's so much more that I could have gained out of it beyond what I did already. And I think what I would tell myself is to not be afraid of asking for help, to go out of my way to talk to people that want to talk to me and ask them for advice, ask them how I could improve myself in a lot of different ways that I was struggling with first year. And yeah, just don't be afraid to ask for help, because even the smallest of things like asking for extensions or asking professors for like ways in which you can improve your work, I was surprised as I found out over the 4 years that they're so willing to help you improve yourself. And develop yourself. And that's just something that I think if I would have realized sooner, I would have benefited from it even more. So that would be my first thing. I think the way that Yale comes in and helps you is in two ways. One is that most big companies have recruiters that work with certain colleges because they want to recruit people from those colleges, and Yale is one of them. So especially when you're going to consulting, finance, and even in tech off late, they will have recruiters that work specifically with Yale, trying to recruit Yale students to come on board and join them with their work. So I think in terms of the finding jobs and internship side of it, the network really helps you get your foot through the door and actually find out what you're interested in as well. And then if you want to go towards the research side, research at Yale is really not a competitive thing. You can really just hit up a professor and say, hi, like I'm really interested in your work. I read this paper. I really just want to work with your lab. Can I do that? Do you have any open positions? And more often than not, in most cases, they will say, sure, like I'll get on a call with you and I'll let you do it. And in my case, I researched my first year with two labs that I, again, no exposure to before coming into Yale. One was the Economic Growth Center, which did economic research in South Asia. And then the other one was a computational biology lab. And I had zero exposure to biology. And they would throw around these fancy terms like genome sequencing and blockchain and all of these things that I had no clue about. And they helped me through it as well. So I think in terms of research opportunities, there's also a lot that you can do very easily.
Yeah, that's really unique, I would say, for undergraduates to get access to researching with very senior tenured professors, even as early as their first or second year.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to, again, their focus on kind of nurturing and cultivating an intellectually curious, vibrant campus, even for undergrads, and also just like the relationship building that happens throughout the way, right? And that is why the alumni network is so strong and so generous, because like they know that if you're a Yaley, like you have a very deep bond, right? It's not like, okay, we're like spread out and all doing our own thing in the city, right? You live on campus together in your community, and that's really sacred.
Yeah, no, that's so right. When I started attending Yale, it was this whole like concept of college pride and merch and stuff like that. It was just all very new to me, and I couldn't really understand why people, especially Yale alums, were just such diehard fans of Yale. They like for God, for country, for Yale would be on their banners everywhere, even in their houses, and they would love talking about Yale. And it took me a while to understand, now that I finally graduated, why they have such a deep bond with Yale and why they are so helpful to other Yale undergraduate students, because I think most people, touch wood, have a great experience in college, and Yale makes sure that you have a great experience. And when you come out of that, I think it gives you so much that you want to give back as well in all ways possible.
So what are these senior societies?
Yeah, so they're called secret societies outside of Yale, but they're very much not secret. There are a lot of them, and a lot of people within their senior class, more than half of the people in their senior year, decide to take part in these societies. So essentially, the idea is that you take about like 10 to 16 group of seniors who have not really intersected on campus before, and they might know of each other, or they might know each other as acquaintances, but they've never really gotten to be friends with each other, and you put them together in this group, and then you spend the entire senior year, you meet at least twice a week, Thursdays and Sundays, and you get to know them a lot better, a lot more. And there are a lot of traditions, but the very common one is that you do bios with them, which is you narrate your whole life story up until that point to them, and you get to know them really, really well because of that, because you spend so much time together and you know everything about their life up until that point. And I think that's something that's very unique to Yale. There are some other colleges, like Harvard has finals club, Princeton has eating clubs, but at Yale it's not that exclusive. It's very inclusive, and a lot of people participate in it. And obviously, like any other college, the number of people that you meet like sort of kind of plateaus as you go up and up and up, but in senior year it just gives you an opportunity to meet other seniors that you had no intersection with before, and a lot of them end up becoming your best friends, which was my case. The people in my society ended up becoming my closest friends as well. And yeah, I think it's a very cool concept to just branch out of the circles that you are already in and find people from other spaces on campus and get to know what they're doing, and just things that you would not have had any exposure to in the past 4 years, you learn a lot about it through them.
Wow. That's so cool. Very unique again. I've never heard of this bios concept. I feel like you could use that in any other circumstance to get to know someone.
No, exactly. My suite tried to do it as well. I think bios is definitely very heavy at Yale as well, because a lot of other social spaces do it as well. The most like commonly associated with them are societies, but frats do it and suites do it. Like, it really is up to you, but it's a good way to get to know someone and about their whole life.
I'll definitely try that next time I really want to know someone in depth. Okay, and what would you say was your like favorite or most standout campus tradition?
So I think my favorite tradition and also my favorite memory across these 4 years was the first year snowball fight. It's just such a cute memory to look back at and so overwhelmingly positive. It happens really organically, but it's the first heavy snow of the year. All the first years descend on the old campus courtyard and really just like start chasing each other, start throwing snow at each other, snowballs at each other. It's just like pure euphoria, honestly, and it just happens so organically and it feels just so nice and sweet, and I look back at it a lot as my favorite night at Yale.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, now that we've covered all the academics and extracurriculars, I want to come to some juicier questions now. We hear a lot of stereotypes about all the Ivy Leagues, and there is a sense of perhaps a tinge of, one could say, New England preppiness, pretentiousness that is associated with some of the the top Ivies. But I want to know, like, what are the major stereotypes you've observed associated with Yale, and to what extent do you find that they're true?
Yeah, I mean, like, bang on. I think the whole stereotype of being really preppy and really elite goes for most Ivy League universities, and especially Yale as well. And I wouldn't say it's completely false. Obviously, on the face of it, there are a lot of things that Yale does that do come off as very preppy of sorts. All the events that they have for you, you have all of these formals and all of these balls and whatnot that you're attending, and a lot of people also come from very privileged backgrounds there, so you do get the sense of like preppiness. But at the same time, I would say people at Yale take themselves far less seriously than people outside of Yale consider them to be. I just think that a lot of people there are very laid back and very chill in terms of their vibes. They're just not people who think too much about the way that they're coming off of. They're not trying to like portray something. It's also a very diverse crowd as well. The diversity has increased a lot in the past decade or so, and it's just continuing to increase as well. So I think obviously while there's some remnants of the elitism and the preppiness, there's I think a lot more to it than that. I think people are very laid back and are just very helpful and very open and not as exclusive as a lot of people outside of Yale might think of them to be.
Yeah, it's good to hear that they've increased their diversity, because there is an outward perception of being heavily white, New England, waspy.
Exactly.
And perhaps that was the case many years ago, but your experience was that there were people from all over the world and diverse ethnicities and races and religions, etc.
For sure, yeah. I think it's about like the international students itself is almost like 10 to 15% of the student body, which is a huge number. And it just keeps increasing every year. And that's just talking about one aspect of diversity. There's just so many ways in which the Yale campus is so diverse. And I think it would definitely shock a lot of people who think of Yale as a very preppy, elite, rich white boy school. I think it is very different from that in real life. And then I ended up getting into Yale. And when I got into Yale, I really very honestly had no clue about what my experience there could look like. Obviously, it was a liberal arts experience and I knew some facets and some aspects of it, but I wasn't too sure about what that would look like. But then in that 1 month that you get to like decide on your college, I was deciding between a bunch of other schools and a bunch of other STEM heavy schools. I spoke to a lot of people from Yale who were just so positive about their Yale experience. They could not tell me like one thing that they did not like about Yale. Obviously, it's not Disneyland, but at the same time, they were just so overwhelmingly positive about it and just so very welcoming and helpful. It was just like something that was so exceptional and not anything that I'd encountered with other colleges. And I came from a system where I hadn't had a lot of freedom to explore in terms of my subjects and stuff. And I was like, wow, this would be a great opportunity for me to branch out from just what I want to study and explore some different fields and make the most out of that experience. Not just limit myself to STEM, which they did have a great program of, but also sort of dabble in other fields that they were also very well known for in humanities and social sciences. So that's how I went about making that decision, and touch wood, like it ended up turning out for the best. So
awesome. That's wonderful to out of here. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Spill the Tea with CC. We hope you enjoyed learning all about Yale. Do be sure to hit subscribe, like this video, share it with any of your friends who are thinking about applying to Yale or any other Ivy League, and leave in the comments below whether you think the Ivy League would be a good fit for you. And finally, final words of advice from our guests today are?
Yeah, so I would say just be authentic as possible, be compassionate, and there's just so much that you can learn from the people around you. Every person around you has just so much to offer, so I think make the most out of it when you can. And yeah, just good luck.